You are live. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. I don't know what time zone that you are in. I'm so excited to have Diana DJ Wade here with me today. And we're going to talk about the leadership skill that I have to admit I've never heard of before, that is called restraint. And I'm going to ask her a lot of questions. But first, let me introduce her. Diane's been working technology and business operations leader, specializing in building high-performance teams, solving complex organizational challenges, and making technology useful, friendly, and user-centric. She's an integrator of technology, people, and culture. The three work best in harmony. She has experience in pharmaceutical, retail, government, and nonprofit industries. Hello.
Hi.
How
Thanks
are
for
you?
having me.
Yeah,
Okay.
I love having you. I know we had a conversation and we were so passionate about culture. We're like, culture is everything. Culture is everything. Oh, Aliza already said, so excited for the discussion. Me too. I have no idea what to expect. We don't have a plan really, but we're just going to chat about what makes someone a bad boss and how to be a better boss. So tell me, what the hell is restraint?
Well, I think restraint is really about what you as a leader don't do. Oftentimes when we are in a work setting, we're evaluated on and we are kind of held accountable for the things that we actually do. But sometimes the things that we don't do are even more important, especially when you're in a leadership role, because there's a power dynamic that kind of comes into play where everything you do ends up being amplified. Everything you say, everything you do has an outsized impact. You've got to be really careful about that. So sometimes to have like a 10 impact, you actually only need to act at like a level 5 or a 7, because then that power dynamic will bump it up to where you want it to be. And I think demonstrating that ability to show restraint is something that nobody really talks about when it comes to leadership skills. And it's so important because when you, even just an offhanded comment can come across as like a directive when you don't intend it to be that way. And the things that you would normally have done as an individual contributor are going to get you in trouble because everyone's watching you very, very carefully. And you've just got to be really careful and kind of rein yourself in a little bit, show some restraint, because it's the only way to offset that power dynamic impact.
I love that. So we call it self-management. We talk a lot about self-management, relationship management. Like you said, we have an impulse. And some people, and we work with those people, a lot of them are abrasive leaders that we coach. They just follow their impulse. They're like, they have 17 different impulses and they just go with it, right? That creates chaos. And I love what you brought. And I think often when we talk a lot about impact, as a leader, everything you say and don't say, do and don't do, has an impact. And I've seen many times where a leader would tell me, I didn't even say anything. I was just sitting there. I'm like, yeah, you don't need to. Your body language said everything.
Yes.
And it can be very scary for people, right? Because then we become so self-conscious. We're like, okay, so what do I do? What do I not do? So give me a couple of examples of impulses where people did not restrain themselves and kind of the impact it had.
Well, let's just take a really a common one that I think most leaders actually have, which is somebody comes to you, somebody who works for you comes to you and asks you a question. How should I do this? What should I do? We as leaders are so accustomed to having been the doers in our past, and that's what got us to this position, that we just jump in and we tell them what to do. We tell them how to do it. We just answer their questions. If you demonstrated some restraint, you could actually instead walk them through the thought process to help develop their ability to think through things and then to be able to take on and tackle those challenges on their own. This is something that happens all the time because it's super easy. It's super fast to just answer the question and then be done with it and move on. And that's almost everybody's natural inclination. But as a leader, your job is to develop them so that they don't have to keep coming to you for those kinds of things. You need to get them to the point of self-sufficiency. So that takes restraint on your part because, yes, you know how to do it and you could do it. And by pretty much every business measure, you could do it better, you could do it faster, you could probably do it less expensively. But that's not your job anymore.
It's not sustainable.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
it's not
it's not
sustainable.
scalable,
Yeah.
because then they're going to keep coming back to you every single time, as opposed to being able to do it on their own, which is ideally what you really want your team members to be able to do.
Yeah, and I love it. It's like, yeah, you become in a bottleneck to every decision, everything. So what's cool is I'm getting into that restraint. It feels like more powerful now because it does take a lot of discipline, self-discipline. Like, yeah, not to do what's easy and to do what's right. Because you're right. And we're busy. Like, I just did a workshop today on time management, like with the company. We're so busy putting down fires that the default behavior is obviously to just do what's easy. So since this is a bad boss, give me an example of like a bad boss you had in your life, and like as confidential as you can, and what made them a bad boss that you're like, I'm done, I'm quitting.
Well, before I go into that, I wanted to touch on the time constraint piece
Okay.
really quickly, because
Okay.
you highlighted
Yeah.
something I think that's really important. We oftentimes do just jump in and give the answer, or just do it for people because it's the easy thing, it's the fast thing, and we think it's saving time. But I think if you were to look in the long run, then you're not actually saving time, because then they keep coming back to you for all of those things, and you end up wasting all of your time doing other people's work, doing other people's jobs,
and enabling them
yes,
to keep coming back. It's like a drug addict.
Exactly. When instead you could teach them to fish kind of a concept, give them the skills necessary so that they can do it themselves. That will free up your time down the road. And that gives you the time to either reinvest in continuing to empower and enable your team members, or to do all of the other things that are on your plate that you need to do, that always seem to be the things that you're doing after 5 p.m. because you've spent your entire day managing or micromanaging your team members.
Everybody is like, like after 5, I can actually do the work.
Yes,
this is where the work day starts for a lot of leaders. So what are some lenses? I am fascinated by this topic because, again, in our experience, training leaders, there are always time constraints. So is there a lens that you would be like, when do you identify like, yes, this makes sense to do for my, just do it, and like, when do I need to restrain myself? What are some, kind of give us the parameters?
Well, there's a 3-part question that I think is the most important thing to ask yourself at all times. First, does this have to be done or said? Then, does it have to be done or said now? And does it have to be done or said by me? And if you ask that 3-part question before you respond, before you act, before you react even, then you're more likely to provide a restrained and a very well thought out and well measured response to any situation that you happen to be in. And I think that's what really comes down to. So the parameters are going to be different based on the circumstances of any of the situations that you're in. But if you can slow yourself down and restrain yourself enough from just giving the immediate answer and that natural inclination you have to just jump in and say, does this have to be done? Does it have to be done now? And does it have to be done by me? That'll give you the answer you need in terms of how best to proceed.
And it's so hard because by nature, we are leaders, right? Like people who are in leadership roles, they're leaders by nature. They're like stand up. They have answers. They were the kids in the school who's like, can I say something? Like those are right. And it's hard because they also say like, but that's what made me successful.
Yes.
Like I had the answers. I did this thing. So I have been rewarded my whole life for my leadership skills. And now I got promoted into leadership and you tell me like, restrain yourself.
Stop doing everything that made you successful.
Oh my God, that's so right. That's the fascinating piece of it. I have a game that we play sometimes, and by we, I mean other facilitators. I would think of something, I would think of a word and wait for someone else to say it. And we call it, it's almost like you're putting intention into this space. If you believe in energetic field and you say, okay, there are 20 people, here's what I want to say. And I have always something to say. And I'm like, what if I just put it out into the space, thought of it, and wait for someone else to say it? So that is just an experiment for those of you listening to this conversation. Try it next time. It can also keep your brain busy as a leader too, because it's hard to like shut up and listen and just actually still be engaged, right? So it's like, think of something and see when it shows up. Sooner or later, it will show up in a circle. And it's like you said, does it have to be said by me? And sometimes we listen, and this is the hardest part, like pause. Again, leaders, every morning we have a Monday morning meeting, and I ask everybody, what did you guys do on the weekend? And nobody says anything. So I fill up the space. Or I see it in training. I would actually ask leaders in training, especially senior leaders, do not fill up the space. They feel like it's their responsibility, especially if they're like, well, I invited you, and then the facilitator asks a question and nobody says anything. So as a leader, it's my responsibility to fill up the space. I'm like, no, it's not. Let there be pause. Get uncomfortable, see what shows up. Absolutely. But I agree with you. It takes that self-discipline and restraint, like that's why I'm like, we use self-management, but I love restraint. Seems like more disciplinary in a way.
Yeah. And it's something you have to work at. And a couple of things that you touched on. One is all the things that you've always done are the things that are going to get you into trouble because they're now somebody else's job, and your job is to make sure that they are doing those things. There's a great book by Marshall Goldsmith called "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." And that is a book, if you haven't read it, if you haven't listened to it, it's fantastic. And it talks a lot about that. And one of the big leadership mistakes is adding too much value. So when you're the one adding value, that you're basically shutting down the rest of your team from doing so. I like to think that there's a price to pay every time you open your mouth, because when you open your mouth, it generally results in other people shutting theirs. And if you do that too often, they're just going to stop speaking up altogether.
Because you train people how to be with you and around you. I agree with you. We're always like, whatever a leader brings to the table is what's allowed at the table. Right?
Exactly.
So we go back to that piece of but how do I restrain myself, but also not become too conscientious also of like my impact all the time, because especially for new leaders. So when do I speak and where do I not speak? When do I contribute? I love what you're saying. It's like it's a practice, and I like giving the metaphor of like the volume button.
Yes.
When am I speaking too much? When am I not speaking enough? And also, if you're someone who talked too much for a while and now all of a sudden you just, me too. Like I'm doing it right now as we speak. If you're someone who spoke too much and all of a sudden you stop talking, like that is also not safe for people, because they're like, well, what happened? You can tell them, you know what, guys, I am working on my leadership skills of restraining myself. So don't make it a secret, be like, I'm just not going to say anything, because remember, that will have an impact. Say like, hey, I noticed I talk a lot in meetings and I want to create more space for other people to contribute. And it will take us time to like create this new practice, and it's going to be uncomfortable and there'll be a lot of pauses, but I just want to share with you as a leader, that's something that blame it on us and say, I watched this LinkedIn Live and they talked a lot about how to restrain yourself. And that's what I'm working on.
Well, and that touches on the second thing I think that you can do to be a better boss when it comes to demonstrating restraint. And that is really about sharing that accountability, involving your team in helping to call you out when you are adding too much value, when you are taking over the conversation, when you are speaking up. And this goes back to the types of work that you do with culture and psychological safety, because you've got to have safe environment with trusting relationships where people are comfortable speaking up, and where they're actually comfortable calling you out, and where they're comfortable voicing contrarian opinions and points of view. But building that into your team is the second most important thing you can do in order to make sure that you're demonstrating restraint, because you're not always going to see it yourself. So get other people involved in telling you, hey, your volume is up too high. You need to turn it down a little bit, let other people talk.
And we can do it with like fines.
Absolutely. Yeah,
I trained my kids. We all laugh. It's like a joke because two of my kids are teenagers, and now they call me out on stuff, and it's like the most hilarious thing. But they'll be like, "Hey, mom, you're taking over dinner conversation." And as embarrassing as it is, right? It's like, oh, wow. Like sometimes, you just, and again, if it's like you said, if it's a safe environment, if we have built trust, if I believe that you guys support me also, I support you and you support me as growing as a leader. I've never been a leader before. I've never done this before. I tell my daughter all the time, I'm like, I've never mothered a 14-year-old. I don't know what it's like. I know what it's like to mother a 9-year-old, but 14, 15, I've never done it. I'm learning. So I love what you're bringing up. There's something to be said about space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'll give you an example. We worked with the company a couple of weeks ago now, maybe last week, and we were talking about values, and they have their core values. And then we said, okay, out of those core values, what are the behaviors? How do we know that we're living these values? How do we include them in our performance management? And what happened was they had one value was get shit done. And another value was adaptive creative thinker. And I said, they're almost conflicting values. So how do I know when you want me to take space to think and be creative? And when do you want me to just get shit done? And it was so fascinating because we had over 100 people on the call, and we created different ways for them to contribute and say, okay, when do you guys know? Then what does it mean? How do you know, when is what? What does it look like to be creative and adaptive? And what does it look like to get shit done? How does it connect to your value of collaboration, right? Cross-functionally. So what do you think of the whole, I don't know, shift in paradigm of yes, we're always busy. And I think Restraint and all the other creative work needs space and time that we just don't have.
Well, I think that you can create it, though. There's a book by a former Navy captain, and it's called Leadership is Language. The book talks about red work and blue work, so thinking time and doing time. And I think during your thinking time is when you want to encourage people to be creative, and you want people to throw out the ideas and the spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks, and encourage different points of views and people to poke holes in the ideas that are on the table in order to try and find the best possible ideas, the best possible solutions. But once you've settled on a course of action, you move into the doing piece. And then during the doing piece, you need to have your head down and be doing it. And you cannot continually interrupt people while they're doing things with new ideas and with creative insights. And your
go back to restraint.
Yes, that's where you demonstrate the restraint, where you can see them doing something and you could probably do it a little bit better, or there may be a better way, more efficient way, but they're in the middle of doing, so let them do. But pre-planned times to bring your head back out of the doing to the thinking time where, okay, now we're back in another thinking time. Let's evaluate where we've gone so far. What can we do better the next time we put our heads down and start doing the work again? And I think if you schedule yourself that way to have pre-planned times when this is when we're creative and this is when we poke holes and come up with new ideas and change direction. And then this is a time when it is fixed pretty much. And we're just going to be heads down doing the work. That's the important thing. And I think you can really schedule that. And that helps alleviate a lot of those pressures.
This is great. And I would add a third piece of and then we create space to debrief.
Yes.
How did it go? What worked? What didn't work? Companies ask me right now, what's with the remote work? And I think this is such a perfect example. The thinking, the creative, the brainstorming, we get together in the office. And that's what I love about hybrid. That's when the juice happens. And then we all go home, put our head down, and we'll work on our stuff and get our stuff done. This has been amazing. I agree with you. It is about scheduling and restrain yourself. Oh my God, I'm walking away I need to work on this.
I think a lot of us do, because it's not something we're used to doing. And we all want to feel like we're valuable, that we're adding value, that we're contributing. The challenge is that sometimes when you're in a leadership role, you can contribute too much.
I think most of us do. And that's why I'm definitely seeing how other people are working. I'm because a lot of leaders are also visionaries.
Yes.
And they're not good executors. They're but what about this? And what about this? And I'm definitely guilty. I'm I have 17 ideas and I send them out and then people start working. I'm oh no, forget it. Let's do this instead. And so I'm so appreciative of this conversation. Thank you so much. I'm walking away with I'm going to start blocking like thinking time and working time. And they're two different times.
They are.
And I will share links to books that you recommended. They've been so amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your expertise, and such an important skill. So again, I'm sure there will be other questions in the chat in LinkedIn Live after people watch this. And I'm so appreciative of our time. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And yeah, guys, create some space and restrain yourself. Don't be a bad boss with Anya Soto and DJ Weed. Yeah, let's do it every week.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Bye.